And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. 1 to 5 years and $20,000 in exam fees is the average cost for international medical graduates according to the Medical Council of Canada website. Recently, the Conservative Party of Canada announced the Blue Seal system to streamline the process. On today's Open Connection, we return to the conversation with Ellis Ross.
I think there's a lot of incentives already in place, but I think it comes down to recruitment and retainment in terms of doctors and nurses. I mean, I've seen doctors and nurses head to Vancouver, Victoria. I don't think it's well known. It's a lot of public healthcare nurses got frustrated with the amount of stress, the amount of their working hours. And so what they do is they quit their public health care job, go to work for a private nursing firm, and they get hired back at their same job with higher wages. I don't blame them for that. But in terms of the billions of dollars that this province spends on healthcare, why don't you see that as a reality? And that would help your recruitment and retainment. And there's a lot that goes into recruitment and retainment. I know that as a chief counselor. And I think it's got to be a team effort. I think it's got to be the municipality, the province, the feds, the hospital, and the people all teaming up to say that, hey, we don't just want you as a nurse or a doctor to come here. We want you to bring your family. Because we have hiking, fishing, we have recreation, we have hockey, we have soccer, we have basketball, we have this, we have yoga for your husband that does yoga. I mean, this is the problem that we ran into as chief and council when we couldn't find a head administrator. And we realized money's not the only issue here. You want to attract somebody here for long term, that person is making a big commitment to you, so you've got to give something more than money. So I think one of the issues that the campaign promises I've heard was a blue seal. That's good because there's some doctors and nurses in Canada that aren't allowed to practice medicine because they got their education in a different country. Well, the blue seal initiative is basically, look, if you challenge the test and you pass it, you can practice medicine in Canada. So that landed immigrant that's driving a taxi, who's a doctor, could challenge a test. They pass it, they can become a doctor. I think this is a different world we're living in, different circumstances, and I think that there's different solutions to the problems that we're facing today. You know, I think in the beginning the carbon tax was well thought out. It was supposed to address the way we thought as citizens about emissions and our carbon footprint. I think governments actually didn't follow up on that enough. But I do agree with the sentiment, and I've always agreed with the sentiment, that a government policy shouldn't put the citizen at a disadvantage. And that's what we're seeing now. The cost of living is going through the roof. But we haven't, as Canadians, we haven't really looked seriously at some of the new initiatives that are coming with newer technologies. I mean, humans can be quite innovative when they're faced with a problem. And I've come across a lot of different technologies that address not only the emissions coming from, say, the buildings. Some of the biggest polluters in the world come from cities. So I've actually gone through this technology that's available in Canada to capture the emissions coming from buildings and cities. And they're actually using this technology in New York already. So the guy that brought this into Canada, that has the rights to it, can't get an audience with legislators. You could mandate this. And now you're not passing the burden on to us as consumers, as people, on everything that we purchase that has a carbon tax attached to it. If it's not directly attached to it, it's attached to the transportation cost that got that product from a certain place to your shelves.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Last year, Source 3 Energy X Inc. and the Skeena Industrial Development Park signed a Memorandum of Understanding to collaborate on the development of the Skeena Clean Hydrogen Hub, a large-scale clean hydrogen and derivative fuel products production center in Terrace. Let us return the conversation with Ellis.
The other technology I really like is the latest one that Terrace is proposing. I like the idea that the local regions should actually take all their garbage, their compostable garbage, and put it in one spot and capture the methane from that. And from that, use a process to make hydrogen. So now, all you need for this is government support. That's all you need. So once you get the hydrogen, you then have the ability to make a fuel like diesel a lot cleaner by adding that hydrogen to diesel, anywhere from 5% to 10%. So, hey, there's a technology that's reducing your carbon footprint, and it's not a huge burden on us as citizens. And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of things that we can be looking at, especially when you consider last year, federal government, BC government, contributed $100 million to a battery plant down in the Lower Mainland. If you're willing to put that much money into a green initiative, surely there's other initiatives that you can think of as well. Nobody wants to pollute the planet. But our quality of life is based on affordable energy. Let's face it. So when you're putting pressure on these companies, to leave our country because you're actually just putting too much policy in them, too much cost. You're right, LNG Canada, they got the biggest PST tax break in BC history. They got a cap on a carbon tax at $30 a ton. That's really what basically made it attractive for LNG to locate. They were just about there. I mean, they were going to make their final investment decision prior to 2017. But that little bit of incentive coming from the BC government is actually what made them say, yes, we'll build. Now, all I'm saying is you're willing to do that. You're giving a huge break to corporations. Then why can't you do it in different fields and stop coming back to the citizen with higher carbon tax rates with no return? LNG Canada got a return. They got a PST tax break. They got a carbon tax cap at $30 a ton. But for the citizen, the carbon tax keeps going up and up and up. And the citizen can't make their grocery bill or their energy bill or their mortgage bill. Where's their return at the end of the day? And that's all I'm asking is really consider the citizen. I've never liked drugs and booze. I hate it.
You've seen at the front end, it's actually destroyed lives and families.
I've seen it destroy lives when it was just marijuana. I've seen it destroy lives when it was just mushrooms. Remember mushrooms? I hated it when it was just cocaine. Heroin. I hated it. I never imagined that you could come up with something worse. Fentanyl. And you lace all your other drugs with it. And there's a pretty good chance that you're going to get addicted to it if it's laced. And the more you get into it, the more chance there is of dying. And I'm talking about this firsthand because in the Native community, we're burying our family and friends. And so it's not politics for me. I just get heartbroken every time I got to go to a funeral or every time I see somebody that I knew suffering. I never imagined that I'd get to that point where when this first came out, nobody knew what fentanyl was. It's just a new drug. And I'm going around, I'm campaigning in 2017 to be an MLA, so I'm going to different communities and I start telling them, we got to start being honest of what drugs were around in the 80s and how much we did of it and how much drugs and alcohol we actually did. And teach our kids that what they're facing is 10 times worse than what we ever faced because now it's their lives on the line. And I got a couple of smirks from the audience. But I was serious. But I didn't know it would be such, it would grow to such proportions that we've seen today. I didn't know that. Because we saw the odd death, we saw the odd addiction coming out of 2017. Then all of a sudden, Hastings, it's full of fentanyl drugs. Prince George, it's full of drugs. Terrace, we know it's here. And I think we've taken too long to address something that we knew was going to have horrible outcomes.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Our distant forebears wrestled with the concepts of alcohol addiction, not unlike those of today. Is addiction a sin or a disease? Martin Luther viewed moderate alcohol use as God's gift, but intemperately, it was a moral transgression. Let's return the conversation with Ellis Ross.
When I got in as a counselor in 2003, our council was dealing with social issues, too much welfare, unemployment, poverty, but they're also trying to deal with substance abuse. And mainly what that was back in those days was alcohol and a little bit of marijuana. Cocaine was just starting to become a problem, and that's what the conversation was in terms of how do we address this? Well, we should get funding and bring a program in. We should do this, we should do that. And so that's what I learned, not only living through it as a kid, as a young man and an old man, but also as a politician, because we talked about that. And so when I was looking at all these people talking about addictions, the one thing I'd ask was, have you ever asked the First Nation their opinion? We've been dealing with addictions for decades. We know what addictions is like. So, I mean, it's gotten to the point now where everybody's got an opinion on fentanyl. And I think right now you're past the days of trying to head it off at the pass. You're past that. Now you've got a really big problem with the fentanyl and how easy it is to get fentanyl. Couldn't believe how easy it is, and in tiny amounts. Like such a tiny amount can get you addicted or kill you. And I don't know. I'd like to see more people talking more seriously about it. And try to change the mindset of those people that are considering experimenting, at the very least, and just do what you can, because we can't keep letting this grow larger and larger and larger. We can't do that.
It's economic independence that's going to make the difference.
Yeah.
I understand that Nisga'a was having a difficult time with their the permitting process for their LNG plant.
Right.
Because of red tape.
Not necessarily red tape. Basically what happened was that they're going to go off an existing pipeline application. And what happened to that pipeline, there's a thing called substantial startup. If you can prove you've done enough work to actually lay the groundwork for your project, and they come and investigate, and they say, okay, you've done enough work to say you've got substantial startup, therefore your certificate is good forever. So this is why Enbridge bought the old Chevron pipeline from Kitimat to Prince George. It's safe. The government can't come in and say, oh, we're going to cancel your certificate. Well, Nisga's not in that boat. So when I was in MLA, I was trying to say, Nisga'a, you should renew their certificate. But the government said, no, they've got to apply for substantial startup. So Nisga'a is trying to do all the work to show they've got substantial startup. And once they've done the work, and BC government will come in and take a look at it and decide whether or not that certificate gets saved under the substantial startup clause. If it's not saved under that clause, Nisga's got to start over. And it costs tens of millions of dollars to go through an environmental assessment in BC. Except if you're now, they said there's no environmental assessments for solar or wind projects. So that's not going to cost much. But for a pipeline, coming from where they're coming from northeast BC to Nisga'a, that's a long way. And they'll have to start from scratch if they got to start over in a new certificate, which means they got to go through all that consultation again. I mean, right now, given the trade war that we're going to get into in the United States potentially, and everybody talking about how we got to get our resource economy, Niska's sitting there shovel ready to get their project going. They can inject hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into our economy. They can inject hundreds of millions of dollars into the revenues for BC government and the federal government. And it's going to diversify our market. They're not going to sell it to the United States. They're going to sell it to Asia. So I think they check all the boxes.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
On June 25th, 2024, Cedar LNG made history when a positive final investment decision was declared for the world's first Indigenous majority-owned LNG facility. In this final segment of Open Connection, Ellis gives some background on this project.
We didn't know that Haisla's approval of their environmental certificate was overdue. We didn't know. We found out by accident. And when we found out, we took it to the BC legislature, we got up in question period. How come Haisla doesn't have their certificate? They followed the rules, they did everything they were told to do, they spent the money, and they don't get a certificate. Why not? So government would get up and give us some political answers, and I was the one leading the questioning on it. And one of the answers I got back, I couldn't believe this answer. It's complicated. LNG Canada was complicated. I was there for LNG Canada. I was there for Haisla Cedar LNG. LNG Canada got approved. But you're saying Haisla Cedar, a smaller project that's basically isolated regionally, is more complicated? What's so complicated about it? Anyway, at the end of the day, they did approve it. But if we hadn't gotten a hold of that information, Haisla Cedar LNG probably would have been still trying to struggle to get their approval. And I kind of think, I'm hoping Niska LNG doesn't go through the same process, especially since everybody now is saying we've got to expedite these projects. Okay? Well, Niska needs approval. LNG Canada Phase 2 needs approval. If they're going to expedite projects, LNG Canada has got an argument of whether they should use natural gas to drive their turbines, where BC wants them to use electric drives. That's a $100 million question. Maybe $200 million. I'm not sure what the cost is going to be. But if you're going to expedite the approval for Phase 2, then to me it only stands to reason that you're going to allow LNG Canada to have gas-driven drives. Because BC Hydro, you don't have the infrastructure from Prince George to Kitimat to provide the electricity. And you don't have enough electricity for all your green energy dreams across BC as a whole. So if you really want to diversify your trade markets to combat what President Trump's doing, then you got to look at what LNG Canada is doing for Phase 2. You got to look at what Niska's doing. You got to look at what Cedar's doing. You got to look at the mining companies up north that haven't gotten a permit for the minerals for those electric cars.
Haisla is a lot better now than it was when you first walked in.
Oh.
And it's economics.
Yeah.
That economic freedom, cutting those ties to what you mentioned earlier with the Indian Act, has able to allow the community to prosper. Do you see the Niska's on that cusp too?
To be fair, Niska has always had a bit of an economic base with their treaty. They've had forestry. They've already engaged with mining companies in and around their territory, so they had a bit of a taste of it already. A lot of First Nations got a head start, which is quite ironic because Kitimat was an industrial town. 7 miles down the road, Kitimat Village, we're not involved in any shape, way, or form. But once we get involved with forestry, we get involved with mining, LNG, everything changed. And, when I was a young man, the choices I made when I came into mining and got a job was alcohol. It was part of my calendar to the point where I became an alcoholic, 25 years recovering. But for some reason, and I'm quite proud of this, for some reason, this next generation that got all these jobs and all these opportunities in Kitimat, they chose not to take the same path I did. And there was no programs. There was nothing. And so not only do I see the wealth that actually changed our communities, I also see the opportunity that changed individuals. And I find it quite remarkable. I still think there should be a study done on before and after. Because a lot of these, I think a lot of these kids of today, they're more advanced in thinking about drugs and alcohol than I was when I was a kid. Because I had very little opportunity, right? I couldn't get a full-time job. So you don't get that, you don't get to determine your own future, you get pretty angry, right? You become, and you start to do what's happening around you, which what I fell into. So I kind of swore that nobody would have to go through what I went through, and that's why I was so aggressive in going after these opportunities. And I'm still amazed at what this has done to community members.
Do you think it could have been hope? They had hope because they could see a future?
I'm not sure. You know, we did an interview with CBC. They followed me around Kitimat with a camera. And I met one of my friend's daughters. So I asked her, so can you do a Q&A with me in camera? Yeah, sure. So she told me, so on camera she's going, well, I wonder if you can help me. We used to work 7 days a week, 10-hour days. Wow, okay. She's a single mom. And all right, well, what's the problem? Well, now we're working 6 days a week, 8 hours a day. Why'd they take that extra day away from us? And I'm not speechless very often, right? But let me get this straight. You want to work 7 days a week. You want to work 10-hour days. Yeah. Okay, I don't know. And she said, think about it. I bought a van. I bought an iPad for my daughter. I went to Vancouver and all this stuff. And the more I saw of it, the more I thought, yeah, this is exactly what I was after. I didn't think it would get to that level where they wanted more and more opportunity. But yeah, hope, I think it more translated into reality for them. It was just an incredible time. I hope to relive it. I want to see other First Nations experience it. I want to see other smaller non-Native communities experience it. I don't care what your walk of life is, but when you see opportunity and you build on it in Canada, I mean, that's the dream. You want a good life. You want a good life for yourself, your kids, your grandkids. And if anything, I hope that's part of my legacy. All the initiatives that our people voted on, like in impact benefits agreements, I want to see them realize the benefits that are listed out in those agreements. I want to see employment, training, revenue. I want to see that.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.